It was the morning of my 31st birthday, though no one marked it save the calendar on my phone blinking a tiny cake icon. I'd already been awake for hours, forcing my feet into worn steel toe boots and pulling on the faded work shirt for another double shift at the auto shop, because rent doesn't pause for birthdays and overdue bills don't send polite RSVPs. The shop's fluorescent lights buzzed as I clocked in 2 minutes early, partly out of habit and partly because I hated waiting. I'd barely logged onto my break room playlist when my screen lit up, a message from Mallory. My heart pinched, anticipating a simple, happy birthday, maybe a promise of leftover cake after her shift, a hug that didn't feel like an obligation. Instead, the words cut deeper than any wrench I'd turned all week. I sold your car. My family comes first. Be grateful I let you live here. My breath caught as if I'd swallowed a shard of glass. I blinked, thinking it must be a joke. Maybe Orion's idea of twisted humor, until the seconds ticked by without a follow-up emoji or explanation. Before I could compose a reply, another notification. Oh, and my brother Orion's college tuition is due. $5,200. You'll cover it. My phone felt heavier, a dead weight. I nearly dropped into the concrete floor. I stared at those numbers. $5,200 scraped together for his art history classes while I scrambled to cover my own rent, utilities, groceries. I typed, not happening. The hammer blow landed almost immediately. Then pack your ass. You're dead to me. I sank against the cool metal locker, the echo of the message reverberating in my skull. My heart pounded not with surprise. Hell, this storm had been brewing since I signed every utility bill, wired every tuition transfer, cleaned every dusty corner of the house they treated like it was theirs, not mine, but with a fierce, hollow relief. I was done. My fingers trembled as I locked the phone and slid it into my pocket. I worked the rest of the shift with a measured calm, greasing brake pads and sharpening saw blades while my mind replayed every silent sentence I'd swallowed. You'll cover it. Be grateful. Dead to me. Each one had sewn another stitch in the cage I'd built around myself. In the roar of the compressor, I heard my own pulse steady into a decision. I would not beg. I would not plead. I would simply leave. By the end of the afternoon, the shop's afternoon lull gave me time to text Ronan. 2 words. Need couch. His reply, immediate and without prying, come now. I shut down the computers, unloaded tools, and walked out beneath a sky turning the color of bruised blue. Appropriate, I thought. I texted Mallory a single line. I'm done. No apology, no last-minute compromise. I wanted my words to echo in the kitchen where she would see them first. Walking the 3 blocks home, I felt a brittle calm settle around me. Each footfall on the cracked pavement sounded like freedom. When I reached the house, the front door was unlocked, as always. I stepped inside to the familiar hum of the refrigerator and the ghost of dinner dishes left soaking in the sink. Mallory stood at the counter, peeling carrots with meticulous precision. Trish lounged in the living room with a glass of red wine, head tilted back like a queen surveying a conquered kingdom. Conrad dozed in his recliner, eyes shuddered against an imagined sun. My blood chilled at their indifference, as if they'd been rehearsing this moment for months, waiting for me to emerge. I asked about the car sale, voice low. No response. I asked about the tuition demand. Trish's laughter, cold, brittle, filled the space. It's the least you could do for a family that took you in, she said, flicking her wrist. I didn't flinch. I gathered 2 duffel bags from my closet, clothes, toiletries, the few mementos that still belonged to me. Without uttering another word, I felt their eyes on my back as I walked through the corridor, each step away a reclaiming of the backbone they never bothered to notice I had. At Ronan's loft, the heater wheezed to life, filling the concrete room with a grainy warmth. The cat, a slender tabby with yellow eyes, jumped onto the mattress and curled against my side. I stared at the cracked window overlooking empty rooftops, the city's pulse muffled at this height. For the first time that day, I allowed myself a long exhale. I pulled out my phone and disabled the auto payments for the mortgage my name covered, signed out of streaming services, removed my name from utility accounts and banking apps. Each tap felt like a stitch unpicked from a garment I'd worn too long. I didn't steal anything. They'd already convinced themselves of my disposability, but I withdrew my presence and funding from every online ledger they accessed. The backbone they never saw had slipped away. Night came, and with it the first tremors of their panic. My phone vibrated with group chat hostility, Mallory's frantic messages, Trish's accusations, Conrad's threats. The Wi-Fi was down. They blamed the provider. Netflix was gone. They blamed the remote. The water bill missed. They blamed the city. None of their frantic text reached me. I watched them stumble in the dark, because for once they had no manual, no account in my name to rescue them. As I lay on Ronan's stiff mattress, the cat purring against my shoulder, I felt a calm rage smoldering in my chest, a recognition that I had been both provider and prisoner, and now I was neither. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt unbound. The house where I'd bent myself into silent service now lay behind me, locked out by my own refusal. Tomorrow I would watch the fallout I'd orchestrated simply by stepping away. But tonight, I was neither indebted nor confined. Tonight, it was just me, and the quiet promise of a life reconstructed on my own terms. The sky had already turned that deep, purplish-gray hue by the time I walked home, the kind of color that blurs the world like an old bruise. Each step felt heavier than the last, not from the weight of my duffel bags, but from the knowing I was walking back not to a home, but to a house filled with people who had long since made it clear that I didn't belong. My boots scuffed the sidewalk, crunching little pebbles that had gathered along the curb, and with every stride, I repeated a single sentence in my head like a mantra. Don't argue, don't explain, don't beg. When I opened the door, the house was quiet, but not in that warm, comforting way you'd expect from home. It was a hollow quiet, the kind that makes your skin itch because it's too rehearsed. Like everyone inside had conspired to hold their breath until I broke first. The hallway lights were on, casting a harsh glow on the photo frames lining the wall. Pictures of Mallory's family from birthdays, cookouts, vacations I wasn't invited to. There was one photo of me, crooked on the edge of the shelf, partly obscured behind a scented candle that hadn't been lit in months. Fitting. I walked past it and into the kitchen. Mallory stood at the sink, washing dishes with so much force I half expected the plates to crack under her hands. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, her expression unreadable except for the tightness in her jaw. She didn't look up. The faucet ran too loud, almost like she was trying to drown out my presence with the hiss of hot water and the scrape of steel wool. She wore the cardigan I bought her last Christmas, and for a moment, it stung to see it clinging to someone who could send a message like that and still move through the day unbothered. Her mother, Trish, lounged in the living room with a glass of red wine balanced like a trophy in her hand, her legs crossed, one slipper dangling from her toes. The TV was on mute, some crime show flickering across the screen, casting pale light on her smug face. She glanced at me once, then back to her glass like I wasn't worth the full tilt of her attention. Conrad, her husband, was stretched out in the recliner. I shut but not sleeping, he was listening. I saw the slight twitch in his eyelid every time the floor creaked. His chest rose a little too rhythmically, like he was pretending to nap just to avoid being part of the conversation. I dropped my bags beside the couch. The sound echoed in the silence. "Where's my car?" I asked, voice steady. No one answered. I stepped further in. "Mallory, where is it?" She scrubbed harder. Trish smirked into her wine and muttered, "You should be thanking us. That car was a luxury, not a right." I turned toward her. "It was in my name." Trish rolled her eyes. "But you used our driveway, our gas money, our insurance plan. What's yours is ours when you live under our roof." "Our," I echoed, not bothering to mask the bitterness lacing my tone. Interesting math. Still no eye contact. Just the soft clink of glass as Trish refilled her wine. I turned back to Mallory. "And the tuition? Orion's tuition?" She finally spoke, voice flat as granite. "He's family. You're not." There it was. Not wrapped in sarcasm or indirect jabs. Just the truth. I was a placeholder, a resource, a living wallet they could guilt and manipulate, until I had the audacity to say no. I looked around the house. Every item I'd bought stood like a monument to my mistake. The Wi-Fi router I installed sat on the mantel. The smart TV I brought home last year glowed with a muted crime scene. The couch I carried up 2 flights of stairs now cradled Trish like a throne. My fingerprints were on everything. My name backed the bills. But my presence? It didn't matter. I nodded slowly, more to myself than anyone else. I walked into the bedroom and unzipped the bags I'd packed at Ronan's. I didn't unpack. I wasn't staying, but I reached into the drawer of the nightstand and pulled out a small manila envelope. It wasn't time for that yet, but I wanted to know it was still there. I slid it back carefully, then turned to the closet. I grabbed a few more shirts, my sneakers, a USB drive I kept stashed behind the bookshelf. No one came in. No one asked where I was going. They were probably waiting for me to scream, to beg, to perform one last scene of loyalty. But I didn't. I zipped up the bags, walked back through the house, and paused by the kitchen door. Mallory finally looked at me. Her eyes weren't angry. They were blank. "I paid for the car," I said calmly, "and 100 other things. But don't worry. You'll figure it out." She opened her mouth like she was about to reply, but nothing came out. I stepped past her, my shoulder brushing hers ever so slightly. She flinched, not because I touched her, but because I didn't flinch in return. As I reached the door, Trish called after me. "You're making a mistake. This is your family." I didn't even turn around. No, this was my silence. "And you mistook it for consent." And just like that, I walked out, closing the door behind me. The air outside felt colder, but it was real. It didn't smother. It didn't judge. I could hear traffic in the distance, the bark of a dog, the rustle of leaves. Sounds that didn't belong to them. They could have the house, the walls, the wine, and the control. I had something better. Myself. And that was more than they ever gave me credit for. Ronan's loft was a glorified garage with a slanted ceiling and windows that groaned in the wind, but when I stepped inside, it felt like a cathedral. Not because it was beautiful, far from it, but because it was mine, in the way that matters. No judgment. No silent expectations waiting to be violated. Just a stained couch, a busted heater, and the distant scent of old oil. Ronan tossed me a spare key and a bottle of ginger ale. No questions, no pity. Just a nod. Bathroom's down the hall. Cat's name is Mercury. He likes the top of your head. I chuckled. This sounds strange in my throat. Good to know. I dropped my bags beside the couch, eased onto the cushions, and exhaled for what felt like the first time all year. Mercury jumped up minutes later, curled himself around the back of my neck like a scarf, and began to purr loudly, insistently. I didn't push him away. There was a strange comfort in the weight of something warm and living leaning into me, even if it was a cat with trust issues and a habit of licking hair. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. It was cracked and water-stained, probably from years of neglect, but it didn't stare back with disappointment or expectation. It didn't care that I wasn't where I was supposed to be, some doting husband in Mallory's picture-perfect life. It just existed, honest in its brokenness. The quiet felt like a second skin, one I hadn't worn in years. I pulled out my phone, not to check in, not to explain, but to begin the work of unhooking. First, I logged into the mortgage portal. My name was on the payments because years ago, when Mallory had begged me to just help us get the loan, I had agreed without hesitation. I was the one with the credit, the one with the reliable job history. I disabled the autopay with a few taps. No dramatic exit. No final warning. Just a quiet severing. Then came the streaming services. I logged out of every profile, changed the passwords, revoked access on every device. Disney Plus, Netflix, Spotify, all of it. I didn't do it out of pettiness. I did it because I finally understood that my presence in their lives had been transactional, a means to an end. I had become an invisible concierge, available 24/7. Next, I hit the utility companies. Water, power, gas. I removed myself from every joint account. Mallory could call them if she wanted. They were in her zip code, not mine now. I didn't know her another watt of electricity. As I worked, I started a spreadsheet. Not to guilt myself. To remember. Every bill I'd paid. Every tuition fee I'd transferred. Every emergency fund I'd coughed up for Orion, Trish, or Conrad. I listed dates, amounts, screenshots. Not for them. For me. To prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. That the sacrifices were real, and the erasure was deliberate. By midnight, my eyes burned from the screen's glare, but I wasn't tired. I was wired. Alert. I felt the way I imagined soldiers feel the first night after defecting from a war they never believed in. Not free exactly. Not yet. But removed. Distant. Awake. Ronan came out around 1 a.m. in a worn hoodie, scratching his beard. "You need anything?" I shook my head. "Just clarity." He nodded like he understood, which was exactly why I'd called him and not someone else. "You got it. Take your time. Heat's crap, but I got extra blankets. I'll be fine." He hesitated at the doorway. "You did the right thing. Leaving." I met his eyes. "Even if it hurts?" "Especially if it hurts." He went back to bed, and Mercury shifted to curl on my chest like a weighted question I didn't want to answer. I laid back again and closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I listened. To the sound of pipes clicking, of the city far off humming with lives not entwined with mine. There was no drama here. No insults masquerading as love. No guilt draped in obligation. Just space. The next morning, I woke to a dozen missed calls, half from Mallory, half from her mother. One from Orion. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I made a cup of coffee with Ronan's chipped French press, sat on the floor next to the drafty window, and sipped in silence. It was strange how easy it was to let go once the noise stopped. I had always thought love was supposed to be complicated, a constant negotiation. But what I'd lived through wasn't love. It was leverage. I was useful, not cherished. That morning, I drafted a few emails, one to the bank confirming my removal from any shared auto loans, one to the university's finance department requesting proof of the tuition payments I'd made for Orion. I wasn't burning bridges. I was documenting what I built. So if anyone ever tried to twist the story, I had my truth. Paper trails don't lie. I also sent myself a long message. A digital letter. It started with, "Remember why you left." Then it spilled out, every little detail. The birthday they forgot. The anniversary I spent alone fixing their busted plumbing while they went wine tasting. The way Trish always called me the helper when company was over. The time Orion crashed my car and Conrad made me apologize for overreacting. I typed until my fingers cramped. I saved it in a folder titled Evidence of Self. By noon, Mercury had adopted me entirely. He followed me into the kitchen, onto the balcony, even to the bathroom door. He didn't ask for anything. He just showed up. Uncomplicated loyalty. I hadn't had that in years. I sat on the couch and stared at my phone, wondering if I should respond to any of the messages. Mallory had sent a voice note, 17 seconds long. I played it on mute. Her face was still, just lips moving and eyebrows twitching. But I didn't unmute. I didn't care about the sound. I cared that she looked tired. Not because she missed me, but because the engine had stopped. And I had been the engine the entire time. That's when it hit me. They weren't mourning me. They were mourning the convenience I had provided. They weren't panicking because they loved me. They were panicking because they had no passwords, no access, no fallback plan. They called it betrayal. But it was just absence. Mine. And they didn't know how to live without it. That night, I took a walk. Just a few blocks, hood up, hands in my pockets. I passed couples in cafes, a father pushing a stroller, an old man sweeping his stoop. Lives moving forward. No one knew me. No one needed me to fix anything. It felt good. It felt like the beginning of something honest. Something I didn't have to earn through silence. When I came back, Ronan had left a takeout container on the counter. A sticky note on top read, "Chicken lo mein. You always like that crap." I smiled. It was more kindness than I'd received in months. And I hadn't had to bleed for it. It started with the Wi-Fi. Of course it did. The morning after I shut everything down, Mallory sent a group text. "Why is the Wi-Fi out?" No punctuation, no pleasantries. Just a command disguised as confusion. I saw the message light up my screen while Mercury stretched across my chest like a smug little alarm clock. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wasn't their IT department anymore. Let them call the provider and explain why the bill bounced. Let them fumble with passwords I had memorized, with accounts that were mine. I took a sip of the lukewarm coffee Ronan left on the counter and watched the storm begin. Within 10 minutes, Trish chimed in. "Netflix isn't working either." "Is the router unplugged?" Then Orion. "I can't even check my school email. Everything's offline. WDH is going on." They were unraveling, and all I'd done was walk away. Another buzz. Mallory again. "What the hell did you do?" Still, I said nothing. I sat in Ronan's creaky desk chair, legs propped up, the cat purring against my shin, and scrolled through the endless thread of messages like I was watching a play I no longer had a role in. I'd played the provider for so long, I'd forgotten what it looked like to see them scramble without me. The illusion was cracking, and beneath it, their entitlement was laid bare. They weren't angry because they'd lost me. They were angry because they'd lost access. My phone buzzed again. "Mallory, direct message this time. Why are you doing this? You're being petty." Ronan leaned back in his chair. "You're building peace now. Takes time. Messy start, but it gets quieter." I believed him. Not because I had proof, but because the alternative was worse. Going back to that silence where I had to apologize for existing, for asking questions, for needing anything at all. Before bed, I checked the family group chat one last time. Trish had started copying and pasting old emails, trying to prove something, her authority, maybe. Conrad had gone radio silent. Mallory was now asking friends if anyone knew a good tech guy. They were trying to rebuild what they had broken. Without me. And the truth? They wouldn't be able to. Because I wasn't just a participant. I was the structure. The admin. The quiet architect of their convenience. And now, they'd have to learn how to live without the man they treated like furniture. I powered off my phone and slipped under the blanket Ronan had left on the couch. Mercury climbed up and nestled against my ribs, already purring like a lullaby. The heater kicked in with a reluctant groan. The lights buzzed. The city outside kept humming, unaware of the tiny revolution happening inside a garage turn sanctuary. And I slept, not with vengeance in my heart, but with something quieter. Absence. Let them feel it. Let them wonder. Because this time, I wasn't coming back with an apology. This time, I was the one who left. And I was finally okay with that. It started with Conrad, of all people. The same man who once told me real men provide without keeping score had now taken to Facebook to air out his grievances like a teenager post-breakup. He wrote, "Some people pretend to be family, but the second they don't get their way, they abandon everything. Ungrateful freeloaders have no place in a real home." It was vague, dramatic, and painfully ironic, considering I was the one who paid their electric bill for 14 months straight. But what really made me pause was the comment section, because that's where Trish added her flourish. "We gave him everything," she wrote, as if their passive tolerance and occasional Thanksgiving plate were some grand inheritance. As if I hadn't bled behind the scenes to keep their crumbling castle from collapsing. As if letting me sleep under their roof while I funded every square foot was a form of charity. Then someone replied, "Wasn't that car in his name?" 3 likes, then 6, then 12. The thread began to shift. The air, if you could feel it through screens, changed temperature. The narrative started to slip. I didn't say a word. Instead, I opened my files, the ones I compiled while they were too busy sipping wine and ignoring my presence. Digital folders labeled with meticulous timestamps. Mortgage _ auto pays, tuition _ Ryan, car _ transfer, phone plan _ receipts. I had proof. Not just stories or emotions. Cold, clean proof. I selected one document. The car title, with my name listed as primary owner, Conrad's name signed beneath mine like a servant signing off a check he never cashed, and forwarded it to my cousin Brielle. Brielle wasn't just family. She was the kind of person who didn't speak often, but when she did, people listened. She worked in compliance for a major bank and had a gift for being surgically precise with truth. I simply typed, "Drop this in the family chat." No comment needed. She replied with a thumbs up. I muted the chat after that. I didn't need to see the explosion. I just needed them to know the matches were in someone else's hands now. By late afternoon, my phone vibrated 27 times. 17 of them were calls from Mallory. I didn't answer a single one. Ronan was on the porch grilling cheap burgers, flipping them with that casual confidence only bachelors have when they're not trying to impress anyone. He glanced over and raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Detonation." I nodded, setting my phone down on the porch railing like it was radioactive. Conrad went public. I went factual. He laughed, passing me a beer. "Man's playing checkers. You're writing the manual for chess." I sat beside him, watching the smoke curl into the fading light. "It's not revenge. It's just subtraction. You don't have to justify it," he said. "You're just pulling your weight off their world. Let it tip." I took a slow sip of the beer, the bitter edge grounding me. Inside, Mercury pawed at the screen door, his tail twitching with that usual cat judgment, like he too had opinions on how things were unfolding. I let him out. He curled up beside my boot and blinked at the sky like he owned it. That evening, I started getting texts from Mallory's friends. Not the close ones, but the orbiters, the ones who used to share Instagram memes with her about clean behavior and cutting toxic men off. Now they were asking me, "What happened?" And she's losing it. "You okay?" One even said, "I thought you guys were solid." I didn't know all that was on you. The implication was clear. Mallory's version of the story had begun to unravel. Without my quiet compliance, she was struggling to spin her web. She didn't anticipate that receipts would talk louder than tears. By 9 p.m., I caved and checked the family group chat. Not to engage, just to observe. The title document was there, neatly posted by Brielle, with a note that said, "Thought we were keeping it real." No anger. No side-taking. Just documentation. Aunt Nadine chimed in. "Wait, he paid your utilities for a year? Uncle Vince, why is Mallory asking him to pay for her brother's tuition?" Someone else dropped a meme, A cartoon of a bride handing her vows to a man labeled husband, while holding hands behind her back with a man labeled ATM, caption, modern love. I didn't laugh. Not because it wasn't funny, but because it was true. Mallory's last text that night read, "Why are you doing this to me? I didn't know it would go this far." That line hit me differently than the others. I didn't respond. I just read it again, slowly, letting the words soak into me. I didn't know it would go this far. As if this spiral were spontaneous combustion. As if I lit the match by removing the wood she stacked for years. As if silence after abuse is violence. But I knew better. She did know. She just thought I'd never say anything. She just thought I'd keep playing the good soldier, saluting through the insults and marching through the exploitation. She didn't count on me leaving quietly. She definitely didn't count on me leaving with records. Ronan crashed on the couch beside me with a plate of greasy food and a cold soda. "You gonna respond?" "No," I said. "That's what they expect." Another speech. Another olive branch. He nodded. "Better to let her sit in it." "Exactly. Let her sit in the absence. Let them all feel the void of the man they used but never saw." That night, I backed up every file, every screenshot, every message to a secure drive. Not because I planned to launch some campaign, but because it mattered that I preserved my reality. I wasn't erasing the past. I was archiving it. For clarity. For sanity. For proof that I was not some angry dropout spinning lies on Facebook. I fell asleep with the laptop humming, mercury curled between my ankles, and the faint sounds of the city reminding me that the world was still moving beyond them. Past them. I didn't feel triumphant, but I did feel clean. And that was more than I'd felt in years. The message came in at 7:02 a.m., before I'd even had a chance to brush my teeth. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a low vibration that stirred Mercury from his perch on my chest. He gave a lazy stretch, then jumped off with a thud as I reached for the device. It was Orion. "No, hey." No preamble, just, "Bro, I didn't ask for this. Dad said you'd handle it." He signed me up without asking. I stared at the screen, still groggy, and read the words again. The irony almost made me laugh. So now I was bro again. Now, when the tuition bill was bouncing back and the school finance office was sending out warnings, suddenly I was family again. Suddenly I was worth messaging, not to apologize, not to ask how I was doing after being tossed out like trash, but to shift the weight back onto my shoulders. I didn't reply right away. I got up, splashed cold water on my face, and stood in front of the tiny bathroom mirror. My eyes looked different lately, less tired, maybe. Not peaceful, not yet. But something had shifted. There was a new clarity in the lines around them, like the smudges had been wiped off a lens. When I stepped back into the living space, Ronan was already up, heating something in a pan. The smell of eggs and garlic filled the air. "You want some?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah," I said, more out of habit than hunger. I sat on the armrest of the couch and looked at Orion's message again. There was no question in it, just the assumption that I would somehow fix what had fallen apart. I remembered the night I drove him 6 hours to tour a college he barely knew the name of, just because his dad said it might be good for optics. I remembered swiping my card at Best Buy while he picked out a top-tier laptop because he insisted anything less would make him fall behind. I remembered watching him cry when he thought he'd flunked out, and I stayed up all night helping him study. And now this. I finally typed. "Then maybe you should ask him why the guy who paid for your laptop, your phone, your dorm deposit just got kicked out." Read. Silence. For a while, I thought that would be it. Another message tossed into the void, another truth they'd pretend was too uncomfortable to respond to. But 10 minutes later, a new one appeared. "Sorry. I didn't know." Those 4 words sat like lead on my chest. Because I believed him. Or at least, part of me did. Orion wasn't cruel like Trish, or manipulative like Conrad. He was naive. Raised in a house where boundaries didn't exist and gratitude was optional. He didn't know because no one had taught him to look beneath the surface. He didn't know because it had never occurred to him that the man quietly covering his bills might also be the man slowly fading under the weight of it all. I stared at his message for a while. Thought about responding. Thought about extending an olive branch, something human. But then I remembered the night Mallory sent me that text, "You're dead to me," and how Orion never once reached out. Not even a single, "What's going on?" So I put the phone down. Ronan handed me a plate of eggs and rice, a mismatched fork balanced on top. "You good?" he asked. "Define good," I said, but I took the plate anyway. We ate in silence. The TV was on in the background, some old kung fu movie playing, the audio too low to follow. It didn't matter. I wasn't watching. I was still turning over Orion's message in my head like a coin I couldn't quite spend. It was an apology, sure, but it came after the fallout. After the support system collapsed. After I withdrew. It wasn't accountability. It was panic. After breakfast, I pulled out my laptop and checked the backup folder. Every transaction I'd made for Orion's schooling was there. PDFs of bank transfers, emails confirming tuition payments, screenshots of text messages where Trish said, "Just put it in your name for now." I highlighted one and sent it to my own email with a subject line, "For the record." I wasn't planning to use it, but I wanted it nearby, just in case the narrative started shifting again. My phone buzzed. Orion again. "Can we talk?" I exhaled, long and slow. I texted back. About what? A few seconds passed. About how things got here. I feel like I missed something big. That was the closest to self-awareness I'd seen from any of them. And maybe, in another world, I would have said yes. Maybe I would have driven to campus, sat on a bench, explained everything like I was the big brother again, the one who always cleaned up the mess. But that version of me was gone. So I wrote, "You didn't miss it. You ignored it. Like everyone else. This didn't happen overnight." No reply came after that. And I felt, not better, but settled. That afternoon, I walked to the corner store to grab cat litter and came back to find Ronan fixing the heater with a wrench he didn't really know how to use. I offered to help, and together we managed to get it humming again. We didn't talk about Orion. We didn't talk about Mallory. Just the pipes, the seals, the little click that meant something was working. When the warmth finally kicked in, I sat back and watched the room fill with it, slow and steady. It reminded me of the kind of love I never got from that house. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't ask for proof of purchase or demand a receipt. The kind that shows up, imperfect but real. That night, I didn't check my phone. I let it sit on the table, buzzing occasionally, flashing the screen like a child begging for attention. But I didn't pick it up. Because I had nothing more to say to people who only listen when things stopped working. And I wasn't anyone's backup generator anymore. The knock came just after 7. Not a timid one. The kind of knock that rattles the hinges and announces itself like it owns the place. I was sitting on the couch in gym shorts, scrolling through old photos, not to feel nostalgic, but to remind myself that there was a time I used to smile without hesitation. Mercury was asleep across my feet, limbs splayed like he was dreaming of war. Ronan was in the kitchen tossing pasta in a pan with the same careless grace he applied to most things. The second knock was louder, more deliberate, and Ronan froze. He turned his head slowly, the way people do when they're trying to decide between ignoring a sound or confronting it. "You expecting someone?" he asked. "No." We both stood still for a beat. The knocking came again, this time followed by a voice. "I know you're in there. Conrad." I didn't have to look through the peephole. I knew that voice too well. The low, authoritative bark of a man used to being obeyed. The same voice that once called me son when no one else was watching. The voice that turned ice cold the second I said, "No." Ronan dropped the spatula and headed for the door. "You want me to handle it?" "I'll come out," I said, stepping into my shoes and grabbing a hoodie. Ronan nodded but didn't move far. He opened the door just enough to see who was there, then stepped into the threshold with that quiet strength he carried like armor. Conrad stood on the stoop, fist clenched, chest puffed up, his eyes scanning the place behind Ronan's shoulder. "We need to talk," he said. No greeting. No apology. Just an order. Ronan didn't budge. "Talk to who?" "To him." Ronan glanced at me. "It's fine," I muttered. "Let him." He stepped aside slowly, but didn't leave. He stood there, arms crossed, silent sentinel. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The air was cool, the sky already sliding into that purplish tint of early evening. Conrad looked bigger than I remembered, or maybe I just felt smaller. But I didn't step back. He wasted no time. "You're punishing Mallory for nothing," he said, voice low and tight. I stared at him for a second, searching for any trace of irony. "She sold my car. She needed the money. She told me I was dead to her. She was angry. So was I said evenly. But I didn't dismantle her life in a text message." His mouth twitched, but he kept going. "You think walking away makes you a man? Real men don't abandon their families. You think calling yourself family makes you one?" I shot back. "Real men don't use others like ATMs with beating hearts." He stepped forward, his hand half lifting like he wanted to grab my shoulder. I flinched, just enough to let him know I wouldn't tolerate it. "Look," he said, voice lower now. You made your point. Okay. The house is chaos. The bills are stacked up. Trish can't stop crying. Mallory's unraveling. And he stared at me like I was supposed to blink. Like I was supposed to cave at the mention of tears I'd never once seen when I was still bleeding for them. I need you to come back, he said. I blinked once, slow and deliberate. You don't get to ask me that. She's your wife. She made her choice. He let out a frustrated breath, the kind that sounds like someone's trying to summon empathy they don't actually have. Fine. You don't want to come back. But you can't leave things like this. You've got people relying on you. And that's the problem, I said, stepping forward until we were eye to eye. You relied on me while treating me like I was expendable. You all did. You liked the version of me who stayed quiet, paid up, and asked for nothing. The second I stopped, I became the enemy. Conrad's jaw clenched. We gave you a place to live. And I gave you a house to keep living in. Do you even know what your electric bill costs every month? The water? The gas? I carried all of it while you acted like letting me sleep there was some gift. He took another step closer, trying to reassert whatever dominance he thought he still had. You're being cold. You want to burn everything down over a couple of fights. I laughed, loud and sharp enough that Ronan took a step closer, just in case. This isn't about fights. This is about being discarded, used, dismissed. You all made it clear I was nothing more than a placeholder until something better came along. So guess what? I removed myself from the picture. Conrad's face darkened. You think you're better than us now? No, I said. I think I finally stopped being less. For a second, I thought he might swing. His hands balled into fists. His chest puffed up again. The whole alpha male performance. But then Ronan stepped forward and said, calm and deadly, you've got 10 seconds to leave my porch, or I call the cops. Conrad looked at him, then back at me. His face twisted, rage and something close to shame fighting for dominance. He took a step back. This isn't over, he said. It is for me. He turned and walked down the steps, muttering something under his breath. I didn't care enough to ask what. I stood there until his car door slammed shut and the engine faded into the distance. Then I went back inside. Ronan locked the door behind me. You good? I'm better than I was. He nodded and went back to his pasta like it was just another Tuesday. I sat down at the table and stared at the plate he'd made me. The steam was gone now. It had cooled. But I still ate. Because this meal? It wasn't conditional. It wasn't followed by a demand or a debt. It was just a meal from a friend who didn't need me to bleed to prove I was worthy of sitting at his table. And that, right there, was more family than I'd had in years. I had slipped it into the drawer the night before I left, right after I zipped up my second bag, and took one last look around the room that had felt more like a hotel than a home for the last 2 years. It was a plain manila folder, no dramatic markings, no read me in red Sharpie, just a clean cover and a weight that came from more than just the pages inside. I placed it gently in the back of the drawer beneath old utility bills and takeout menus, then walked out of that house without another word. I hadn't thought about it since. Until Ronan's phone buzzed over breakfast with a single-word text. Found it. I didn't need to ask what it was. Trish had found the packet. Inside were the artifacts of my time in that house, the unacknowledged evidence. There were screenshots of text messages from Mallory asking me to just cover it this month, or help her mom until the settlement cleared. I included photos of the car title, emails from the dealership, and even the invoice from the insurance I paid every month without fail. And at the bottom of it all was a letter. Typed, signed, and dated. It read, "This is what I covered. This is who I was to you. This is why I left." I imagined Trish finding it first. I could practically see the way her manicured fingers would have pulled the drawer open in frustration, maybe looking for an old warranty or something else she assumed was still my responsibility, only to pause at the sight of the folder. Her curiosity would have gotten the better of her. She would have opened it expecting something petty, a tantrum in paper form. Instead, she found a mirror, one they couldn't argue with. Ronan set his phone on the counter and arched an eyebrow. You ready? For what? He gestured to the text. You know this is gonna get loud. I nodded. Good. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone started lighting up like a holiday tree. First came the calls, then the texts, then the voice notes. Why would you leave that stuff behind? Are you trying to humiliate us? Trish is screaming. Conrad threw a chair. I leaned back in Ronan's chair and took a slow sip of coffee. They always said they wanted honesty. Ronan grinned. Looks like you gave them some. I didn't reply to any of the messages. Not yet. I wanted the packet to marinate, to settle in their stomachs the way their guilt never seemed to. I pictured Mallory sitting on the porch with her face in her hands, staring at the evidence like it was a stranger's biography. I wondered if she even remembered half the things I included, like the time she asked me to wire money for her brother's books and then told her friends she paid for them herself. Or the month I covered 3 credit card bills while Conrad ranted about how lazy men today had become. Around noon, the real meltdown began. One of Mallory's old friends, Kelsey, I think, posted something cryptic on social media. People really be living in glass houses with stones in hand. Beneath it, someone commented, "Is this about Mallory?" Then someone else added, "I'd be screaming too if I found out I was living off a man I kicked out." And just like that, it spread. The whispers became echoes. Trish, naturally, tried to shift the narrative first. She posted a long-winded Facebook update filled with passive-aggressive phrases like, "Not everything is what it seems," and "Some people keep receipts when they're planning to leave, not because they care." She underestimated the internet. Someone shared a photo of the packet, just the top page, where the line read, "Mortgage coverage, 17 months paid in full by my name." Mallory's voice note came in then, the longest yet. I didn't play it at first. I sat with it on my screen, watching the play button pulse as if it could reach me through guilt alone. Then I tapped it. Her voice was quieter than I expected. No rage. Just breathless sobbing between sentences. "I didn't know it would get this far. I didn't think you'd actually walk away. I didn't think you'd make it public. Now everyone's calling me, asking why I let you leave. Asking why I said what I said. I don't know how to fix this. I thought you'd come back. You always did." That last line almost did it. Almost. Because she wasn't wrong. I always came back. After every fight, every slight, every dinner where I sat in silence while they praised each other and ignored me. I came back with my wallet, with apologies I didn't know, with favors that felt like penance. I'd been loyal, devoted, quiet, but not anymore. I didn't reply. That evening, Ronan and I sat on the balcony eating wings from the place down the block. Mercury weaved between our legs like he belonged there more than either of us. We watched the sun dip behind the skyline and listened to the hum of the city doing what it does best, moving on. "You think they'll try to twist it?" Ronan asked. "They already are." He nodded. "But they can't undo the truth." "No," I said, setting down my drink. "And I'm done pretending their version ever mattered more than mine." Across the street, I saw a family having dinner through an open window. Laughter, shared plates, a father leaning over to help his daughter cut something on her plate. It was so simple, so unremarkably warm. I watched for a moment, then looked away. Not because I was bitter, but because I realized I wanted that someday. Not the performance of it, but the real thing. And to have that, I had to stay gone. I had to protect the version of me that finally had the guts to say, enough. Because sometimes the only way to reclaim yourself is to leave something behind. And let it speak louder than you ever could. By mid-morning, the family group chat had morphed into a war zone. Notifications popped like popcorn, one after the other, some long, emotionally bloated paragraphs, others short and jagged like digital shrapnel. I scrolled through them with a strange calm, as if I were watching a documentary about someone else's collapse. Brielle, bless her, had started it. She dropped the screenshots one by one like surgical strikes, organized, time-stamped, and undeniable. First came the message from Mallory asking me to pay Orion's tuition. Then the one from Trish asking me to handle the mortgage until we get through this rough patch. Then the "thank you for covering the Wi-Fi" text Mallory sent just 6 weeks ago, complete with a heart emoji. And finally, a screenshot of the folder's contents, the line-by-line breakdown of my financial footprint in their lives. It detonated. Aunt Nadine was the first to react. "Wait, he paid your utilities for a year? And y'all kicked him out?" Uncle Vince followed. "I thought he just lived with y'all. Didn't know he was carrying the house." Then came Cousin Letty. "So he was paying for college that wasn't his, groceries he didn't eat, and still got told he was dead to her? Y'all wild." Every message hit like a small justice. Not enough to erase what happened, but enough to validate the version of events I lived through in silence. Then someone dropped a meme. A photo of a skeleton sitting at a dinner table with the caption, "Waiting for my turn to be appreciated by people who only call when the lights go out." Another meme followed it, this one harsher. "Divorce, sponsored by gaslighting." It had over a dozen laughing reactions in less than 2 minutes. Someone added a popcorn gif. And suddenly, it was clear, the tide had turned. The people who used to scroll past me at family gatherings were now calling out the ones who had leaned on me without hesitation. Not because they'd grown compassion, but because the receipts were right there in front of them. Mallory broke her silence then. Her text was a block of emotion, a long-winded plea that began with, "I didn't mean for it to go this far," and ended with, "I was just overwhelmed, and I took it out on the wrong person." Somewhere in the middle, she tried to justify the car sale, the tuition demand, the hurtful words. I thought he'd understand. He always did. It was the last sentence that really stuck with me. He always did. That was it, wasn't it? The whole foundation of our dynamic. Not love, not respect, just expectation. I would always understand. I would always step in. I would always hold the line while they pushed it further back. And when I finally didn't, the whole thing collapsed. Then came Orion. He posted a voice note in the chat, clearly rattled. I didn't know he was doing all that. Dad said he'd handle tuition. I thought it was some family trust thing. I'm sorry. I never wanted him dragged like this. He always looked out for me. The sincerity in his voice nearly cracked something in me, but I held firm. Because regret is not the same as accountability. And not knowing doesn't erase the pain caused by the assumption that I'd be there, always, endlessly, even when discarded. The silence that followed his message was loud. Then Cousin Xavier chimed in, "Honestly, y'all did him dirty. Period." Trish fired back. "This is family business. Y'all weren't there." Brielle, calmly and without fuss, replied, "Screenshots say otherwise." That was the moment I knew it was over, not just the fight, but the version of myself that would have felt guilty about starting it. The family wasn't defending Mallory anymore. Not because they were defending me, necessarily, but because the truth had made it impossible to pretend. I'd taken my silence and turned it into documentation. And now they were reading it aloud like scripture they couldn't unsee. I got a private message then. One that hit harder than I expected. It was from Orion. "Grandpa says you're the only adult in this family." It was short, stark, and I had to read it twice. He didn't ask for help, didn't ask for money, just passed on a comment that, for once, didn't feel manipulative or loaded with expectation. The man who used to pull me aside at Christmas and tell me I wasn't built like a leader had apparently changed his tune. Too late, but still, it landed. A beat later, Mallory messaged me directly. I didn't know it would go this far. I stared at that line for a while. The same one she sent in a voice note. The same thought she'd likely repeated to herself every hour since the packet was opened. But the truth was she did know. She just didn't believe I'd ever leave. She just didn't think I'd take my receipts with me. She thought I'd stay in my role quiet, reliable, unpaid emotional laborer. She thought my absence would be temporary. But the thing about systems is that when the power source is removed, everything goes dark. And I was the system. The one who remembered passwords, paid overdue bills, reattached emotional limbs no one else bothered to notice were severed. I was the Wi-Fi, the silent debit card, the emotional translator, the fallback plan, the husband in name, the technician in function. Now, I was a ghost in the machine, and the machine was offline. I didn't reply to Mallory, because she wasn't looking for a conversation. She was looking for control. She wanted the chaos to stop, but only if I'd come back and take the blame for causing it. Ronan came in then, holding his phone like it was ticking. "Your ex-in-laws are trending on Facebook," he said with a smirk. I raised an eyebrow. He turned his screen toward me. Someone had shared Trish's original rant post alongside my itemized spreadsheet, and the comments were vicious. Even people I didn't know were chiming in with reactions like, "Imagine biting the hand that paid your light bill." I shook my head. I didn't want this. "I know," Ronan said, "but you didn't stop it either. That's the difference." I leaned back on the couch, Mercury claiming my lap once again, oblivious to the war playing out across screens. And I realized something important. This wasn't revenge. It was exposure. And the only reason it looked so harsh was because the truth had been buried so long under a smiling mask of family unity and forced gratitude. They'd built the fire. I'd simply stopped fueling it. And now that it was out, they were shivering in the cold. Maybe that's what it took to learn. And if they didn't, that was no longer my problem. It was a Tuesday morning when Ronan found me at the kitchen counter, stirring black coffee I had no intention of drinking. The steam curled upward, evaporating in slow, indifferent spirals, and I just stood there watching it fade. I hadn't slept much. Not because of anger. Not even regret. I'd slept poorly because something in me had clicked into a new rhythm, one that was no longer tied to their chaos. No more late-night arguments. No more waking up to overdraft texts because someone forgot to tell me they used the joint card. No more ghosting through a house as the man who paid the bills but never got a seat at the table. I was no longer the ghost husband. Ronan walked in with his usual half-worn hoodie, tossed his keys in the bowl by the door, and said, "You've got a visitor." I didn't even need to ask who. Conrad again? I muttered. "Nope," Ronan said. "Neighbor." The older woman from 2 doors down. Said something about your ex's dad pacing her porch. I blinked. He's bothering strangers now? Apparently he's asking if anyone knows how to get help paying the electric bill. You want to laugh, don't you? I didn't answer, but yeah, I kind of did. That was the thing with people like Conrad. Their pride was made of glass until it cracked, and then suddenly it was everyone else's fault. Now he was reduced to knocking on neighbors' doors, searching for the generosity he once looked down on me for offering. It would be tragic if it wasn't so poetic. My phone vibrated on the counter. Trish. Again. I didn't pick up. The voicemail icon blinked seconds later, but I swiped it away. She called twice the day before, too. Once at midnight, rambling, slurred. The other time mid-afternoon, voice low and trembling. He's losing it. Conrad. He can't handle the bills. I'm sorry. Please come back. That last part echoed in my head longer than I wanted it to. Please come back. But she didn't mean come back to me. She meant come back to service. Come back to utility. To usefulness. Not to love. I finished my coffee. Or at least, I finished stirring it. Then my phone buzzed again. It was a name I hadn't expected to see. Sterling. Orion. Text message. I'm leaving. Can you pick me up? That sat differently. No demands. No guilt. Just a request. I tapped to reply. Yeah. Meet me at the corner. 20 minutes. I showed the message to Ronan, who simply nodded and tossed me the keys. Bring back wings, he said. Always. The drive was quiet. Late morning traffic was light, and I let the city roll past me, a blur of laundromats, corner bodegas, and sun-bleached posters on brick walls. I hadn't driven this way since I left. The closer I got to the old neighborhood, the more I recognized every bump in the road, every cracked sidewalk I once shoveled in the winter without thanks. I spotted Orion waiting on the corner. Hoodie, backpack, a duffel bag by his feet. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just lighter, in the way a person does when the scales have finally fallen from their eyes. He opened the door and slid in quietly. You good? I asked. He shrugged. Not really, but I'm done. I nodded. No lecture. No questions. We drove in silence for a few blocks before he spoke again. She said you were overreacting, that you'd calm down. She was wrong, I said, eyes on the road. I know that now. That was it. Not a long apology. Not a desperate explanation. Just acknowledgement. And that meant more than all of Mallory's tearful voicemails combined. We stopped at a place on the way back to Ronan's. A little dive spot with greasy wings and cracked vinyl booths. We sat in the back, Orion picking at his fries while I polished off lemon pepper wings that tasted like justice. He didn't say much. But every once in a while, he looked up with that expression, like he was seeing me for the first time. Not as the placeholder. Not as the guy who always bailed him out. But as someone who finally said no and meant it. When we got back to Ronan's, he was on the porch sipping something from a mason jar and flipping through a car magazine. You're not staying long, right? He asked Orion. Orion raised his hands. Just till I find a place. Ronan nodded. Cool. You sleep on the floor. Mercury gets the couch. We all laughed. Even Mercury seemed to blink in approval. That evening, I sat on the balcony with my phone in hand, scrolling through the last few unread messages from Mallory. She'd sent a photo. The porch light, off. A caption beneath. I don't know how to reset anything. Exactly. That was the point. I was done being the one who made everything work while everyone else broke it. I deleted the message. I didn't need to reply, because I'd already answered with silence. I sat out there long after the sun dipped behind the rooftops, the street lamps flickering on one by one like a slow exhale. Somewhere down the block, someone played music out of an open window. The kind of song that made you feel like your story had just turned a page. And it had. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't heartbroken. I was free. And they were offline. Not because I destroyed anything, but because I finally stopped repairing it.